Next question, it's also from Nuki-kun. Any advice on how to better optimize mirrors within a world, including weird stuff that we might not normally try? I noticed that distance calling only seems to work as a single plane, defined by user view angle, which doesn't call things being seen from the side, and I'm wondering if there's ways around it. I also noticed that you can set it up to have transparency, such that you can show smooth metallic surface behind it to show the reflection probe. I'm a little bit confused because there's like a lot.
The first part of the question is like, that's pretty clear, but like I'm not sure what all the rest of the information attached means.
Yeah, I don't know how it kind of relates to that, unfortunately. But for optimizing mirrors, so give people like options. So there's like a few things. If you let people lower the resolution, like, well, the most efficient thing is not to render the mirror when you don't need to. So if you have like calling system that disables it, or like lets people kind of toggle it, or maybe like if you detect the users, not in the area, they cannot see it, make sure the mirror is off. That's the most efficient thing, because the most efficient thing is just not doing the thing, which in this case is, rendering a mirror. The other part you can do is, lower the resolution, because the higher the resolution, the higher the load on the GPU. You can also lower, like, you can disable per pixel lights. If it works enough with the lighting in the scene, that's going to help the performance potentially quite a bit, because the mirrors will force everything to be rendered using the forward path, which the more lights you kind of have, the heavier it gets. So if you disable that, it's not gonna, like, the lighting's not gonna be as accurate, but it'll run faster. And that's pretty much like the main things you can kind of do for that.
Yeah.
There's a note, avatar station. Correcting of 15 months is calling to. Yeah, it's just context. Nuki-kun. Should we rush to put any feature request addition for reflection probe cube map systems? Should we report esoteric bugs? Are they not likely to be fixed before implementation? Assuming I understood right that you are reworking that soon. Well, we're not reworking that soon. Generally, I would say just report things. Make whatever, like, this is actually one that could be like, to the snippet is like when we like announce like a new system, people are like, oh, like for this system implement this. The best thing is, just ask for the feature you want. Let us decide. We might say we're gonna wait until we implement the system, but we also might look at it and be like, no, we can implement this now. The important thing is you let us make the decision. Because we whenever we evaluate it, we kind of look at the state, the code base, we look at what our plans are, we look at the complexity of what you're asking is, and based on that, we will decide how we approach it. So even with the bugs, if there's like a bug that's pretty severe, we might prioritize it, for a system that's going to be replaced, unless, if the bug is like more minor, and fixing it would take, a long time, then we'll be, okay, we're not going to prioritize it because it'll cost us a lot of time. But if it's, very simple, say it's a 5-minute fix, then we might just be, okay, we're going to fix it. The important thing, like all of these factors, you don't have the information to make the decision, so the best thing you can do is, make the issue, and we'll make the decision kind of on our end. So if you feel like it's not something that's super serious, you don't want to make the issue, that's also fine. But, you don't kind of know the answer. Like, the answer is gonna depend on the specific issue.
I do actually have now a snippet that is like adjacent to that.
Yes.
And that is when people like come to conclusions about what they think is happening, like say they discover a bug and they're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because of XYZ, because of whatever. And I'm like, well, did you actually like test it? And they're like, well, no, but it happens when I do this. And I'm like, well, but did you actually make sure that it's like this and not the 5 other systems that are attached to it? And like it and things like that. And then they like make a bunch of like, then they make like an issue on it, and it's like, it's just.
I actually have a video I want to bring in. There is you make a good point, because there is a thing that happens, because I feel like one of the things there's there's a science experiment this always reminds me of. There's a one called the Skinner box pigeon leg experiment. And what it is, like what they did is like they would essentially put pigeons in boxes, and they would make it so like they would randomly, completely randomly, they would get some treats. And what they found is that the pigeons, they would see like maybe the pigeon was, pruning its wing when it happened to get the, treats. And then the pigeon would actually start pruning its wing like a lot more because it thinks that's what it got the treats. And eventually it would get treats at random, and then it would reinforce, the thing that like, okay, pruning the wing, gives me treats. Or another would be like rubbing its head on the floor. So, and then it would get treats at that time, which was completely random, but the pigeon would think it happened because it was rubbing, its head on the ground. And essentially what that experiment found is, you can, our brains, and it's, because it's not just pigeons, it's like pretty much everyone. Like, our brains will make connections where none exist in some cases. And, like, this kind of feels like similar, like when people happen to be doing something, the bug happens, and they'll make the connection, it happened because I was doing the thing. And what people don't realize is, sometimes things are potentially random, like, some things, like, there's systems that are so complex that, like, when you get the bug is, random, which is another part, is, like, whenever you're using Resonite, there's literally, like, millions of things going on every second that you don't even think about, that you don't know about. Like, the code is doing so much stuff in the background. There's, like, various, like, background processes, there's, like, long-running tasks, there's, like, there's just a lot of things, like, beyond, like, what you see that happen, and any of them can contribute to, like, the bug you got. And I've had a number of reports where somebody would be, this is happening because of this thing. And people kind of jump to conclusions, and everybody kind of piles on it, and it becomes like, this whole thing. And the problem is, when we look at it and you don't give us, the straight facts, you give us the reasons, we kind of start investigating that, we go down a rabbit hole, only to find that, like, there's zero correlation, and now we just lost, a whole bunch of time, doing that. So it's best to, like, stick to the facts, like, stick, like, to, like, what you've seen. And if you think something is causing an issue, do actual, like, proper testing of it to verify that's the cause. I actually have, like, a specific example, because this happened, like, I think, like, a month or two back, and this was a little bit, like, upsetting too, because, like, it led to people, like, getting very panicky. It's when we, actually, wait, was it the social bus? Yeah, it was so it was when we introduced the invite requests, because what would happen is, like, we would ask the ask to join button, and then people made a report saying the ask to join button leaks people's invisible status. And people started panicking. They were like, oh no, what's happening? Like, the invisible status is getting leaked, like, it's a security thing, and so on, and people started freaking out about it. Because somebody was like, okay, this person, like, they went offline, but I still see the button to join them is leaking invisible status, and that's what the report was. And then I started looking into it, and I found, like, there was no correlation at all. And what was actually happening is, if user was online, and they would go invisible, like, they would go either invisible or they would actually go offline, the button just doesn't get cleared. So, like, it would essentially just stay there. If you saw that user previously online and they would go offline, the button would stay. If they go invisible, it would also stay there, because from the client's perspective, when somebody goes invisible, it behaves the same as if they went offline. And the easy way to test that, and it's something that people could have done themselves, like, if, because people started saying, this happens when somebody goes invisible. So the first thing I did is I used 2 accounts. I logged in, in both of them, make sure it's online, and I went to, like, invisible, the button stayed there. Then I reset, log on both accounts, make sure both are online, and they actually logged off one of the accounts, like actually logged off instead of going offline, and the button was also there. So there was a very easy way to verify that it has nothing to do with the invisible status, but people made that connection, jumped to conclusions, started panicking, started freaking out, for no reason. And one of the reasons it's also upsetting is because, like, this is oftentimes how rumors start, because, we've seen that happen with other stuff. And, like, what I kind of got worried, like, is that people are gonna be like, oh, Resonite, like, leaks invisible status because, somebody jumped to a conclusion. And it becomes really hard to kind of, fix that after the fact, because, like, once people kind of start spreading that, like, it's like it becomes very, very hard to kind of, like, change the information. Like, I've even had cases where some people would still think, like in the past, like I've talked with people who didn't want to use some features because they thought, like, there was specific cloud variables, and they didn't want to use cloud variables because they thought you cannot delete them. And the problem is, at the time they told me that, you were able to delete them for over 2 years. And that user was using, the software for a year, which means at the time they joined, you were already able to delete them for a year. And somehow, 2 years later, they still think you can't delete them, even though you were able to delete them for 2 years, and they were, like, avoiding to use them. And that's, one of the kind of dangers of, like, rumors, and that, like, that information can be very, very slow to spread and very slow to correct, because, some of the stuff just kind of, like, once the rumor kind of starts, it can kind of go on for a very, very long time. And I wish, like, more people would kind of, think critically about things, and if you see some kind of claim, put some effort into verifying it, make sure it's actually right. Make sure, like, there's, like, a basis to it, because people will say things. People will make connections when there's, none. And you want to be kind of methodical about it. You kind of want to be scientific about it. Because on my end, that's something we have to do as engineers, because we can't fix problems and we can't fix bugs if we don't understand them. So, like, doing that kind of stuff, jumping to conclusions, like, it's generally, from developer perspective, it's detrimental, because, like, we jump to conclusions, then, like, we end up exploring the wrong path, and, like, we won't be able to fix it, because if there's no connection, that means there's no way to kind of fix it through that connection, and we have to find the actual root of the issue. Sorry to kind of hijack your Schnapped.
Oh no, that's fine. Like, I completely, like, I agree with all of that. Like, a similar thing happened at, like, a water park I was going to in real life, where a bunch of the kids thought, like, pressing this, like, pole would make, like, the water sprayers, like, spray or something. And it just, there's no correlation. It was the same thing as the pigeon thing.
Yes.
They just did it because it kept doing it, and they thought they were doing it.
Yeah, it happens a lot. It's how our brains work. So it's, like, it's natural. Like, it happens to everyone. What you have to do is, be aware of it, and, use methods to get around it. If you think there's a connection, put some effort into verifying it's actually there. Especially if you're, like, either report it, or if you want to, freak out about it, make sure you actually have a reason to do so. There's also a video I wanted to bring, because this is very, very, very relevant to this. So I just saw this, like, today, and it's pretty much going on point, so I'm just gonna put it here, and I'm gonna hit play.
Could you go through proper etiquette for making bug reports? Yeah, the best thing you possibly do is you write your description of what happened, right? So, and you don't say, this happens, like, I'm mad at you, you're a piece of shit. Just say, what happened to you? Then, based on the things that you did, in the order that you did them, list out everything that led up to that moment. Not what you think did it, the things you actually did. And then on the last line, put a little arrow and say, this was the bugged behavior. whatever it is. So it's like, I engaged in PvP, I went to cast this spell, I was stunned at the time that the spell tried to be cast, and I was able to cast this spell despite being stunned. That's the bug, right? It's not about your feelings about it. It's not about if you think the developer's dog shit. It's not about if you hate the video game. It's about what happened. And then you just write that. Yeah. Write it like a Stardate log. Yeah, bingo. Exactly that.
Like, this is beautiful, because this kind of summarizes a lot of the, you know, kind of issues we kind of have with it. And because that's another part, like, you know, some people get like very kind of emotional when they report something, and they're like, you need to fix, you know, Resonite's gonna die, you know, and like it becomes like this whole thing, and it makes it hard for us to deal with. And if you make issues hard for us to deal with, you know, by not focusing on the facts, not focusing on the issue, you're detracting from us being able to actually fix it. So if your goal is to fix things, you know, or for us to fix things, the best thing you can do is make our job as easy as possible on that.
Yes.
Anyway,
Like
that's okay.
I won't hold the topic too much longer, but I was just going to say that like that video is very much right. Like I too often, like I see, like I've been browsing a bunch of other GitHub repos recently, and like, you know, sometimes I'll see people getting like mad in like the issues and whatever, and be like, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? You just can't do that. Like the issues place is for putting issues and
It's for
discussing
solving
them.
problems.
Yes, regardless of how you feel, don't bring emotions into it. And this is something that, like, I think a lot of people need to learn to just not bring emotions into it.
Yeah.
Like, and this is especially true, like if you ever like also do, like, let's say you become like, you know, a developer for some, you know, little VR company, right? Internally, like, you know, the same thing, like when you make pull requests, you know, if the reviewer is saying like, hey, could you like tweak this? Why did you do this? You don't get defensive or emotional. You just be like, well, I did it for this reason. If you want me to fix it, I'll fix it. Yada, yada, yada. Just like be very objective.
Yes.
I don't know where I'm going with this, but
No, that is a good point. It's like, you have to realize that GitHub and reporting issues is there to solve problems. And like, it's understanding, you know, if you're like frustrated with something and you want to vent, but the places where you report bugs is the wrong place to do it, because when you do that, it makes, like, it straight up makes it uncomfortable for us. It makes it kind of frustrating to deal with it. And what you're doing is you're essentially hurting your own issue. If you want it to get fixed, you know, by being sort of either like mean about it or angry about it, you know, you're making it harder for us to kind of engage with that issue and harder for us to actually fix it. If you want it to be fixed, focus on the facts, make our job as easy as it is, or easy as possible. And that will give your issue like the maximum chance, you know, of actually getting addressed. But yeah, we should move to other questions.
yeah, we got a few.